A few years ago, in a town called Dumfries, there lived a little girl called Jeanie. She was a happy, loving girl with bright red hair. She did her very best at school and was kind to all the other boys and girls, and she loved spending time with her Nana Dot, who lived in one of those brown houses overlooking the River Nith that looked like they are falling off the hill. One day, because Jeanie had been working extra hard at school, Nana Dot decided to take her out as a treat, so they took themselves up to the observatory. "Can we get an ice cream float at the Pammy Cafe afterwards?" pleaded Jeanie. "Once we've had a look at all the interesting objects from the olden days," replied Nana Dot. "Are you from the olden days, Nana Dot?" asked Jeanie curiously. "No, I am not, you cheeky wee bism," she smirked. They both laughed, and Jeanie squeezed Nana Dot's hand. Inside the observatory, they found the camera obscura that was like a massive eye watching over the town. It has been there for hundreds of years, way before mobile phones were even invented. Beside the camera was a big switch with the words "Do not pull." Nana Dot spied Jeanie looking mischievously at the sign and said, "Don't you dare, so help me Bob." But just then, Nana Dot received a text message from the doctors about her prescription. And as she reached inside her handbag to read the message, Jeanie leaped up and pulled the big red switch. Lights started flashing and a warning sign started to wane, which Nana Dot said reminded her of the war. She clasped Jeanie to her tightly and peered at the town below. The River Nith was pulling in and out of itself as the tide whooshed against the col, and the salmon jumped enthusiastically in time, shimmering in the gaze of the moonlight like missiles launched into the night sky. The swans that had once nestled peacefully on the banks of the River Nith were tiptoeing like ballerinas on the top of the water in slow motion, creating beautiful shapes and using their big wings to make loud, deafening rhythms in perfect time. Jeanie could not believe her eyes. "What's happened, Nana Dot?" she asked. "It's like the town has finally woken up to itself," Nana replied. "Like the olden days?" Jeanie said. "Yes," laughed Nana, "just like the olden days." The buildings on the high street had indeed sprung to life. The mid-steeple had unperched itself from its foundations like an old woman pulling up her stockings, and now seemed to be leading the other buildings in a sort of Highland fling up and down the high street, arms pulling back and forth in a display of complete happiness. Down at the burned statue, Rabbie had come off his plinth and had his arms around Jean Armour, who had also come off her plinth at the bottom of the high street. He was smiling as they approached. "Oh, thanks very much, Jeanie dearie," he declared. "You've managed to break the rotten spell that was put on us. You've saved Dumfries. The Toon will never flood again, thanks to you," he added. "Do you mean you will always be moving about like this?" asked Jeanie. "No," says Rab. "Just at nicht, when all you wee lassies and laddies have headed to your bobos. It's when the Toon comes alive," he winked. Suddenly, the large sound of clink, 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 clop, could be heard through the town. The workers from the 1950s can be seen busying themselves with industry, making, building and lifting things into place. Just at that, the 1 o'clock bell wails through the town, just like it used to do. The workers from the factories and shops pour onto the street with the lunchboxes tucked under their arms. The powder girls from bins blow kisses to the boys from the telephone exchange and the Mechanics Institute. The boys reply by winking back at the girls with promises to meet them at the dancing. Placing her fingers into her ears, Jeanie asks her Nana, "Is this an air raid, Nana Dot? Is that why the people are running so quickly?" "No, that's the 1 o'clock bell, Jeanie. It means it's lunchtime," she added. In between them, a man pulls a horse and cart through the streets, crying, "Rag and bone, rag and bone." He's collecting old junk and giving people pennies in exchange for their old stuff. "Why is everyone giving him their old clothes, Nana Dot? Is he homeless?" begs Jeanie. "Not at all," replied Nana. "He's the rag and bone man and recycles all the things you don't need. In the olden days, we didn't just throw things out. We made do, or we mended." The rag and bone man looks right into Jeanie's eyes and shouts, "You've got to save us, Jeanie! We can't keep buying more clothes. We have to reuse. Reuse. Remember, Jeanie?" Jeanie thought about this for a while. She couldn't quite understand what he meant or believe her eyes. She had never seen the high street looking so full of life. She kind of liked how things looked. Out the corner of her eye, she could see strong women with their hair tied up in polka dot headscarves. They are folding the sheets in perfect synchronization, and it looks like a beautiful dance that fills the streets with the brightest, cleanest white you have ever seen. "Why have they brought their bed sheets uptown with them, Nana Dot?" asked Jeanie. "That's their weekly washing, Jeanie. In the olden days, we didn't have fancy washing machines, so the women had to go down to the public laundry and do all the washing by hand," she answered. "That sounds like a lot of hard work," replied Jeanie. "Didn't people in the olden days ever have fun?" Just at that, the street filled with a sea of colour as lots of boys and girls started to spin bright red and white hula hoops up and down the street. As the boys and girls spun their hips, the hula hoops made a sort of special noise. Woo! 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 They whirled and whooped around them until the street was filled with colour. "See," said Nana Dot, "we used to have lots of fun in those days, and we were allowed to play outside on the street." Jeanie looked on in disbelief. Those hula hoops sure looked like a lot of fun. She was never allowed to play outside on the street. These boys and girls looked ever so happy. One little boy came up and even gave Jeanie a little shot of his hula hoop, which Jeanie thought was very kind. He threw Jeanie a bright red apple and then leaned in so Nana Dot couldn't hear. "Keep the seeds, Jeanie. You will know what to do," whispered the little boy. This thought was interrupted by the sound of rock and roll erupting from a massive oyster shell that had a band playing inside it. Oh, Jeanie could see a small tear running down Nana Dot's face, but she couldn't work out if she was happy or sad, so she squeezed her hand tightly and smiled up at her. "That's the Plaza Ballroom," cried Nana Dot. "That's where I met your Papa Joe. We used to go dancing there." Jeanie gave Nana Dot's hand an extra squeeze, but she couldn't quite get the little boy and the apple out of her mind. She wondered what he meant, but was broken from her thoughts as young people wearing brightly coloured puffed out skirts danced up and down the street with boys with giant quiffs and smart-looking tuxedo jackets. The boys kept on combing their hair back and forth, and together they were jiving and shaking their hips left and right. Suddenly, the lights started to flicker on and off throughout the town. Jeanie looked a little scared and looked up at Nana Dot. Bright street lights flashed on and off. "Don't be frightened, Jeanie," said Nana Dot. "We didn't have enough electric for the whole country because of the strikes, so we had to switch things off to save power in the olden days." "That's what Dad says I should do, but I don't always remember to do it," added Jeanie. "Well, you should, because money doesn't grow on trees, my dear," remarked Nana Dot. Young people with placards and angry-looking faces and punk hairstyles are protesting to the establishment. The protesting punks have colourful hair and piercings. "Why are these young people so angry?" asked Jeanie. "Sometimes things aren't good for young people in the olden days. They don't have as many chances as you have nowadays. They're just scared," said Nana Dot very firmly. "Well, I would be scared if I couldn't plug my phone in," added Jeanie. "It sounds rubbish. No wonder they're angry." Nana Dot threw Jeanie a disapproving glance, and although she knew Jeanie was just being smart, she felt sorry for these boys and girls and the tough times of the 1970s. Nana Dot remembered them all too well. A light bulb flickers in front of Jeanie's eyes like a bright torch and comes right up to her face. Jeanie stands her ground though, but the little light bulb leans over and says in a quiet little voice, "We can't burn our lights forever, Jeanie." Jeanie thought about the things that people were telling her, but she just doesn't work it out. She wondered why they weren't telling Nana Dot, and thought it was possibly because Nana Dot sometimes struggled with her hearing and was a little deaf. Oh, the darkness didn't last too long though. A sparkling disco ball with a bumble DJ inside is shining and shimmering with a sweet disco beat, with lots of people making funny shapes on the dance floor and smiling at each other. However bad the power cuts must have been, these young people knew how to appreciate things, thought Jeanie. A group of Highland dancers were shaking hands with dancers from India who had made Dumfries their home. They weren't disco dancing though. They were showing each other their dance moves, which involved arms in the air and kicking feet out. It looked terribly fun, and Jeanie couldn't but jump into the middle to do a Highland fling. "Namaste," the little boy whispered to her. "You too," replied Jeanie. For although she hadn't really understood what the little boy was saying, she took it to be something friendly, as he was smiling back at her in a way that little boys and girls often do, accepting other children, no matter where they are from. As the power cuts come to an end, the bright lights of the future were shooting into the night sky, filling everyone with a bit more hope. Brighter colours drenched the town centre, making it glow with happiness and hope. Boys and girls, girl boys and boy girls with bright makeup on white faces speak in funny verse that makes it hard to understand what they are saying. Jeanie loves the cool clothes they're wearing and moves closer to get a better look at one of them. Can't quite work out whether it's a boy or girl. No, not that it even matters, she thought. "I love your hair," shouted Jeanie. "I love your hair," said the new romantic. The new romantic smiled further at Jeanie and leaned forward to whisper something. Jeanie leaned in to listen. "Don't be fooled by all this makeup. I'm actually quite sad. All this will be gone soon. You've got to help," they added. But before Jeanie could ask how she could help, The new romantic had disappeared. This was all starting to worry Jeanie a little, for she was always a little girl who would help others. But how could she help others when she didn't know how? She would have to be patient. Music video stars slide down the enormous helter-skelter slide in the Dock Park, singing songs from America with ripped blue jeans and dreams of sombreros. They have big shoulder pads and look like film stars with bright white teeth. Everything looks perfect. Suddenly, robotic raving miners clash with police constables outside the Lowerburn Hall. The miners want to rave, but the police want to break up their party. It starts to feel a little tense, and Jeanie squeezes Nana Dot's hand. "Don't worry, Jeanie. Those young people just want to go to the Lowerburn Hall for some dancing," explained Nana Dot. "A rave is a big dance where young people go to dance to music with quite fast beats," she added. "Why are the police trying to stop them dancing?" Jeanie asked curiously. "Because sometimes older people just don't understand young people, Jeanie. And believe it or not, one day you will be an older person too, and you might not know the music the young people are playing." "What else are the young people supposed to do for fun?" Jeanie begs. No sooner had Jeanie said the words than a giant whistle can be heard at the ice bowl as the Solway Sharks come crashing down the ice with their hockey sticks clicking and clattering as one of the players hits the puck and scores for the Sharks. To celebrate, the Solway skaters move graciously around the ice, creating magnificent patterns that make Jeanie and Nana Dot feel quite lovely. The ice bowl used to have the most amazing discos, Jeanie, where all the young people would skate and dance, said Nana Dot chirpily. "We don't have that sort of fun now. The olden days sounded like way more fun, Nana Dot." It kind of was, Jeanie. "I think young people had more freedom to make mistakes, and we didn't have mobile phones stuck in our faces," she added. On Glasgow Street, we see lots of boys and girls getting on buses, heading off to a big festival called Tea in the Park. They have sleeping bags, floppy hats, tents under their arms. They look very excited to be going away without their parents. "Are they all leaving Dumfries, Nana Dot?" asked Jeanie. "No," said Nana Dot. "They're heading to a big music festival to watch lots of bands. They'll be back by Monday, and probably feeling a bit worse for wear," she added. On the Buccleuch Street Bridge, there are packs of politicians with very long noses and big cheesy smiles, and they seem to be promising everyone the world. They are stood on boxes with lots of people gathered around them. One of them gets into a scuffle with another one, but Jeanie doesn't understand what this is about, so she ignores it. They start shouting at each other, and their voices rise so much it's like they can't hear one another. Suddenly, the voices all melt together, and we can hear people cheering as a bus drives through the town with footballer players on it in blue and white strips. Everyone is singing and dancing and waving their football scarves. Oh, Nana Dot looks tearful again as she remembers the day that the Queen of the South went to the cup final and nearly brought the cup home. Jeanie squeezes her hand tight and smiles fondly at her, for she knows that Nana Dot loves a bit of the footy and loves her home team winning. "We nearly won, we nearly won," the people on the street cheer. "You did us proud," shouts Nana Dot in a very loud voice. "You're all winners to me, son." The party seems to go on day and night, and lots of people head down to the Spiegel tent into the wee small hours to party the night away. Performers from all over the world are there, and you can hear lots of people clapping and applauding. The noise builds like a sort of warbling, getting louder and louder, and then suddenly, boom! A big crashing sound, and everything stops. Suddenly the air becomes very still. Even the jackdaws are quiet as a blue-white ice cloud fills the street with a very, very cold storm. "Nana Dot!" cried Jeanie. "My nose feels very, very cold." This is the beast from the east. It was a very cold winter spell that caused lots of damage, especially to lots of sheep that got frozen in the snow. "We need to hide from the snowstorm," says Nana Dot, trying not to panic Jeanie too much, but really wanting to hurry up. But Jeanie and Nana Dot needn't be frightened, for at the top of the snowstorm was the Ice Queen, and she smiled a sparkling smile at both of them. "Don't be scared," she said. "We only seek safe passage to get the bears back to the North Pole. Do you mind if we come this way? You look like a helpful little girl." "Of course you can," says Jeanie. "I love animals," she added. Just at that, a giant polar bear waddled its way up Dumfries High Street right outside Boots, as if it didn't have a care in the world. As the bear moved through the town, the storm seemed to create a channel of clear air for the animals to pass. "Well, I never," gasped Nana Dot in disbelief. "I guess storms aren't always scary, are they?" Jeanie remarked. The Ice Queen jumps down, and Jeanie cannot believe how beautiful and magical she is. Oh, but she's looking very sad, and you can tell she's been crying. "What's wrong?" says Jeanie. "Why are you crying?" "I'm afraid those poor animals are very far away from home. The sea levels are rising so much, Jeanie. It's making the weather behave in the most peculiar way," cried the Ice Queen. "What can I do? I love animals and I would like to help them," said Jeanie. "I think it might be too late. Soon the whole town will be flooded. The only thing we can do now is plant as many trees as we can. Maybe that way will stop the flooding," said the Ice Queen. The Ice Queen got back onto the polar bear and went on her way. Jeanie thought hard about what she said, but she didn't know how she could help. How could one girl save the town, she thought. It was useless. The town would just have to flood. The people would just have to build another town, thought Jeanie. Nana Dot looked hard at Jeanie, as if she could tell what she was thinking. The Europa Queens are waving goodbye to everyone. "Are they leaving too, Nana Dot?" asked Jeanie. "Not forever, Jeanie. Just until we stop arguing amongst ourselves. Good friends are your friends forever. Always remember that," she said firmly. Just at that, an army of Calvin Harris heads arrived on the high street, dancing and grooving to cool tunes of the future, making Jeanie think about her friends for a second. They loved this song. The whole town had come out to dance to this song with Calvin Harris. There were butchers, bakers and fishmongers, and they were crashing into delivery drivers with big lorries who were blocking the market stalls. There were groups of old ladies who looked quite scared, trying to push their shopping trolleys in between the different groups. Why don't those women just buy it online, Nana Dot? Inquired Jeanie, who didn't quite understand why the old ladies were so scared. Well, maybe they prefer to shop in person and chat to the Mr. Pudding or Mr. Butcher every day. Maybe they like to get out and about, said Nana Dot. But it must be quicker doing it online like Mummy does. She does it all on her iPad, said Jeanie quite curiously. I doubt if any of these old dears have iPads. But they will have been shopping up here for years. And now they don't have anywhere to go because the shops are all shutting, added Nana Dot. Jeanie thought this was quite sad and hadn't thought about how old people do shopping when shops are shut. It made her realise that Nana Dot was old and she too must miss those shops. Nana Dot didn't seem to dwell on this as she was in the midst of the Pride Parade that was marching through the High Street for the first time, with brightly coloured flags and whistles, and people's shapes and sizes blending as one. There was more disco music and rainbows bursting out of the sky. Jeanie was having a great time. She forgot all about that, helping everyone for a second. The eyes of the world joined the parade, not marching, but kneeling in silence, trying to break out of their skins in protest. Some were climbing as high as they could up the life ladders. Jeanie wasn't quite sure what this was all about, but she looked over at Nana Dot, who was holding back her tears. "What's wrong now?" asked Jeanie. Sometimes old people just find things too much, so they have a little blow into their hanky to cover up their pride. I'm proud, Jeanie, of this wee town. I love Dumfries very much, sniffled Nana Dot through her hanky. Me too, Nana Dot, me too, asserted Jeanie. Suddenly things went quiet. Jeanie couldn't see anyone on the street. Where had all the people gone? She looked at Nana Dot and she had a face mask over her mouth. Jeanie wasn't allowed to squeeze Nana Dot's hand this time. The Corona masters were spreading quickly, shooting across the street, sneezing and coughing, trying to infect everyone they could see. No one was safe, but especially Nana Dot. The amazing superheroes pounce onto the street, kicking the Corona monsters in the backside up and down the street like they were playing football. Nothing could stand in the way of these superheroes, and before you knew it, Jeanie was able to run up and cuddle Nana Dot again. "Oh, thank goodness, Jeanie, that's behind us," said Nana Dot. "I'm going to cuddle you extra from now on, just to make up for it," Jeanie replied. But no sooner had things looked like they were getting back to normal than a massive light shot into the sky, catapulting Jeanie and Nana Dot way into the future. They could see the new hoverport in Dumfries, where everyone flies around town on their boards, even the Nana Dots. They both laughed and laughed. They could also see how Greg's works. Just by thinking about donuts, they're sent by the drones and land in your hand within 10 seconds of thinking it. "I love donuts, Nana Dot. I think I'm going to like the future," Jeanie declared. Then a voice appeared from nowhere. A little boy from Neverland called Peter Pan flew over to Jeanie. "You think it's always like this? Do you know where these polar bears were really going?" asked Peter Pan. "The Snow Queen said they were going home," replied Jeanie. She was being nice, silly. "These polar bears have become extinct, Jeanie, and it's all because people don't look after the earth. It might seem pretty cool flying around in hoverboards, but that's because the world is flooded and we can't move around any other way, said Peter Pan in a rather aggressive tone. For this wasn't like any part of the story, wasn't like any other part of the story. This was the future. 2050 to be precise. The things Jeanie had imagined about the future had come true. The robots, the hoverboards. But she hadn't contemplated just how bad things could get. Whilst Jeanie was struggling to think of a solution, she looked across at the mill green and could see a sign. It read, "Last Zoo on Earth." Inside it were the last remaining species on Earth of animals that would now be extinct. "What am I to do, Peter Pan?" asked Jeanie. "Think, Jeanie. The answers have been on your journey. Your generation can be heroes. All you have to do is try," replied Peter. Suddenly Jeanie felt inside her pocket and reached for the seeds from the apple that the little boy had given her. Then she had an amazing thought. "Nana Dot, we need to plant these seeds. We need to plant as many trees as we can to save Dumfries from being flooded," begged Jeanie. "Oh, what seeds are you talking about, Jeanie?" asked Nana Dot. "Inside my apple. The little boy told me, and everyone has been telling me, that I have to do something to help them, Nana Dot. I know what it is. I don't need to be a superhero. I can just change my ways," she added. Jeanie and Nana Dot got to work as quickly as they could. Nana Dot was very good at gardening, and with a little help from Peter Pan, who had some special fairy dust in his pocket, the tree grew and grew and grew and grew until it towered over the whole of Dumfries, giving life below it. Jeanie promised to turn off her lights and reuse as many things as possible. She went through the town and collected all the plastics and recyclable goods until they were in a massive big pile. "Recycle your bottles! Recycle your plastics!" shouted Jeanie. Nana Dot looked on and felt very proud of Jeanie, who was now tearing up and down the high street, encouraging everyone to reuse their plastics. Jeanie gathered all the plastics on the suspension bridge, and before long you couldn't even walk on the bridge. And all the bottles started overflowing into the river. "Oh, Nana Dot, now I've just made things worse," said Jeanie very nervously. But what happened next took everyone by surprise. Suddenly, with a whoosh and a swirl of water, a giant river monster emerged from the river Nith, made out of all the plastics that Jeanie collected. Nana Dot and Jean had to take a step back because this thing was enormous. "Thank you, Jeanie," said the river monster. "You have brought me back to life. I cast my spell on Dumfries a long time ago and made the river flood each year to remind people about the damage to the earth." "Eh?" gasped Jeanie, who couldn't believe her eyes. "You are a kind and helpful little girl, and you have saved Dumfries. Now everything can go back to normal. But you have to promise me," added the river monster. I promise, said Jeanie very excitedly. "Promise you will look after the earth, and remember we share this land with amazing creatures," the monster pleaded. "I promise. I love animals and I love helping people," said Jeanie. And at that whoosh, Jeanie and Nana Dot were stood inside the camera obscura, as if the whole thing had never happened. But Jeanie and Nana Dot would always know it happened. And Nana Dot turned around to Jeanie and said, "Oh well, I don't know about you, wee yin, but I think we've earned ourselves an ice cream from the Pammy Cafe. What do you think?" asked Nana Dot. "I agree, Nana Dot, but I'm not going to have a plastic tub anymore. I'm fine with a cone," she answered. They both laughed and remembered this day for the rest of their lives.